This video will be covering the last page of your trig test review. For numbers 10 through 13, you're asked to convert radian measures to degrees and degrees to radians. Please recall that if you are going to change radians to degrees, that you take your radian measure, say it's pi over 2, and remember that when we get degrees, we don't want pi in it, so we'll have pi on the bottom and 180 on top. And then, of course, your degrees would cancel out, and that would leave 90 degrees. So remember that when you convert degrees to radians, you multiply by 180 over pi, and when you want to convert degrees to radians, you divide by pi over 180, just invert it. Okay, so multiply by pi over 180 to convert radians to degrees, divide when you want to convert degrees to radians. So for number 10, we're given this measure in radians. So we've got pi over 8. We want to convert to degrees, so multiply by 180 over pi. Just type in your calculator, 180 divided by 8, and we get 22.5 degrees. I don't think you need to see that step, I guess, but I can type it in for you. So again, our pi's cross out, 180 divided by 8, 22.5. All right, next we've got 290 degrees. So here we are going from degrees to radians. That's when we, well, I should say this. You are going to divide by 180, but technically the ratio, I apologize, is to multiply by pi over 180. So I always think divide by 180, so that's why I wrote divide. But to convert degrees to radians, we're going to multiply by pi over 180. Just remember that if you have a hard time memorizing these, you do want to end up with pi in your answer, so we're going to need it up top. So we're going to type in this negative 290 divided by 180. And hit math, enter, enter. And we get negative 29/18. So I'm going to put the numerator on the top with our pi and the 18 on the bottom. Next, we're converting negative 3 pi over 4. I want my pi to cancel out, so I'm going to put pi on the bottom, 180 on top. And I'm going to multiply negative 3/4 times 180. And we get negative 135 degrees. All right, next converting 130 degrees. I want to end up with pi in my answer, so I'm going to put pi on top. That means my 180 goes on the bottom. And I'm going to type in 130 divided by 180. Math, enter, enter. And I get 13/18. So I'm going to put 13 on top with pi and 18 on the bottom. Please make sure I see you set up your ratios for your work. Next, it says to find two coterminal angles between negative 360 and 360. It says so if applicable. So that means you may or may not have two. You may only have one. So just as a quick recap, if I have a circle, a unit circle, this here would be my initial side. And then for any given radian measure around the circle, say it's right here, this I would call my terminal side. So a coterminal angle is any angle that ends up with the terminal side at this position. So right now it's at pi over 2. If I sweep this 360 degrees in the positive direction, I'm actually adding 360 degrees to 90 degrees, or I'm adding 2 pi. So if this was 90 degrees and I added 360, then we would have 450 degrees. So that would be a coterminal angle. If I did it in radians, it would be pi over 2 plus 2 pi. And just remember, it's 1/2 times 2. If you can add fractions quickly in your head, then you would know that's 5/2. Or you can just type in 1/2 plus 2. Math, enter, and we'd get 5/2 there. So that would be 5/2 pi as a radian measure. So that means that we can find positive coterminal angles by continuing to add 2 pi or 360 degrees going in the clockwise direction. But we can also find coterminal angles by subtracting 360 or subtracting 2 pi and going in the opposite direction. So if I take this original 90-degree angle measure, pi over 2, and I subtract 360 instead, that means, I'll do it in degrees first. If I have 90 degrees, I could subtract 360 degrees, and that would give me negative 270 degrees. So negative 270 is a coterminal angle with 90 degrees. If I do this in radians, that would be pi over 2 subtract 2 pi. Well, hopefully you see that that's 1/2 minus 2, which would be negative 3/2, or again, you could type it in your calculator. 1/2 subtract 2, math, enter, and would get negative 3/2. So negative 3/2 is also a coterminal angle with 90 degrees, or pi over 2 rather. So basically, to find coterminal angles, we add 360 or 2 pi if it's in radians, and we can subtract 360 or 2 pi. So our job is to find those angle measures that are in between negative 360 and 360, or negative 2 pi and 2 pi. So that means if I'm trying to find my coterminal angle with negative 450 degrees, I'm going to add 360. I know not to subtract 360 because if I subtract 360, I'm going to have a far more negative number than negative 360. So if I take my angle measure, negative 456, and add 360 to it, I get negative 96. And because that is in between negative 360 and 360, I'm going to list that as an answer. But our job is to find 2 if possible. Well, if I have a negative number and I add 360, I'm going to have a positive number, but it will be less than 360. So that is also another coterminal angle. So I also list 264. So those are my 2 coterminal angles. If I were to continue to add 360, I would go above 360, and so I would not list that. So negative 96 and negative 264 are the 2 coterminal angles for negative 456 in between negative 360 and 360. Next, I've got negative 3 pi over 2. Now, if you like, you can convert this to degrees. That is negative 270 degrees. Remember, we just talked about negative 3 pi over 2, but up here, so negative 3 pi over 2 would be sweeping in the negative direction. So I can convert that. I know it's negative 270 degrees. I can multiply by 180 over pi if I wanted to convert it. You don't have to do this. Certainly, you could just add 2 pi, and then just type that in. You'll get negative 270. So that means I can add 360 to get my angle measures. And I get 90. Now if I add 360 again, I'm going to be too high because I only want angles in between negative 360 and 360. So my only one is 90 degrees, but if I give you radian measures, which I do for number 15, do not tell me 90 degrees. Make sure you give me that as a radian. And as a radian, that would be pi over 2. But like I said, you don't have to change it to a degree measure to help you out. Just know that you need to add 2 pi. If you were to go more negative, you would go too low. So if you add 2 pi, you can just type in negative 3/2 plus 2. Math, enter, enter, and there's your 1/2 pi, or pi over 2. So make sure when you list your answer, it's in radians because I'm giving you an angle measure in radians. Next, we have 187 degrees for 16. So if I have 187, if I subtract 360, I might stay in that range from negative 360. If I add 360, so let's talk about this. If we take 187 and add 360 degrees, that's going to be above my max of 360 that I'm able to list. So it is a coterminal angle, but it's not within the range I'm asking you for. So 187, if we subtract 360, we get negative 173 degrees. If I were to subtract 360 again, it would go too low, negative 533, so I do not want you to list that. So just this one here. All right, and next we've got 16 pi over 7. So if we type in our calculator 16 sevenths and we add 2, math, enter, enter, that's going to give me 30 sevenths. 30 sevenths is far above 2, so I do not want to list that one. But if I do the 16 sevenths and I subtract 2 pi, or just subtract 2, I get 2 sevenths, and that would be 2 pi over 7. And we know 2 sevenths of pi would be like in quadrant 1, so that's definitely in between negative 360 and 360. So I'm going to list 2 pi over 7. And then I'm just going to check to see, can I subtract 2 pi again? So I'm subtract 2 and I get negative 12 sevenths. And negative, if we do 12 divided by 7, we get 1.7, so that's less than 2. So that means we can list that one. So negative 12 pi over 7. So if you think about it, what would give us a value of exactly negative 2 pi? And that would be negative 14 sevenths. So since that's greater than that, that would also be a coterminal angle we should list. All right. So now we are asked to find each trig value, and this is simply using your unit circle. Remember, you will have a unit circle on your test in case you have not yet got 100. So you can complete it then, but I have a unit circle in the right corner, bottom right corner of this screen to help us out. So when it says find the trig value for sine of negative pi over 2, please recognize that on the unit circle down here, that negative pi over 2 would be starting at 0 pi and moving in a clockwise direction. So if I'll draw a, let me see, a circle down here since I can't point to the unit circle. So if I'm wanting to find negative pi over 2, I would sweep down here 90 degrees. So this is negative pi over 2 when we go in a clockwise direction. So remember the value down here, your cosine is 0, your sine is negative 1. So if you are asked to find the sine of negative pi over 2, it is the y coordinate, so it is negative 1. Next, we are asked to find the cosine 11 pi over 6. Look at your unit circle where 11 pi over 6 is, and your cosine is square root of 3 over 2. Next, you're asked to find the sine of 3 pi over 4. So you find 3 pi over 4 on your calculator, and your y value is square root of 2 over 2. Next, you are asked to find the cosine of negative 3 pi over 4. So negative 3/4, guys, that means you're just going in a clockwise direction. So if I were to divide this bottom half into fours, this would be negative 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So I'm looking for this radian measure right there. So if you looked at here at your unit circle, then the measure of negative 3/4 pi actually corresponds to 5 pi over 4. And since I'm asking for the cosine value, which is your x, that would be negative square root of 2 over 2. So you're going to want to just use your unit circle to help you. You can, if you know it mentally, then you can just picture it in your head or if you have them memorized. But you don't have to fill out the unit circle on your test. That's only if you have not yet got 100. But if you want to fill it out to help you with these, then you can do so. Next, it says to solve for x between 0 and 2 pi. So what this means is you're actually going to give me the radian measure that has these sign values. So if you look again at your unit circle here on the right, where it says sine of x, x being your angle measure in radians, where is your sign -1? So if you look all the way around your circle for your y value in your ordered pair, your y value is -1 at 3 pi over 2. Next, you're asked at what angle is cosine the square root of 3 over 2, remembering that your cosine is your x value. So if you look at pi over 6 in quadrant 1, your x value is square root of 3 over 2, so that occurs at pi over 6. And you could have more than one answer, and you do for this one. You also see that 11 pi over 6, your cosine is the square root of 3 over 2. So look at that unit circle at 11 pi over 6. See how the x value is square root of 3 over 2? So you also need to list 11 pi over 6. Next, you are asked to find the radian measure where your sine value is the square root of 2 over 2. So sine is your y value. So on your unit circle, if you look at pi over 4, your y value is the square root of 2 over 2. So that's going to occur at pi over 4. And we also have positive square root of 2 over 2 over in quadrant 2 at 3 pi over 4. And lastly, for 25, you're asked to find the measure at which your x value is 0. So look at your unit circle. Where is your x value 0? That occurs at pi over 2 and at 3 pi over 2. So you can imagine for each one of these so far, they're going to count as 1 point. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And then each of these will count as 2 points. All right, so make sure you're aware of how much everything's going to be worth, so you don't want to miss out on anything. And lastly, you're asked to define sine on the unit circle and then cosine on the unit circle. So recall from the radian activity and building the unit circle that we learned that our sine value is the y-coordinate of all those coordinates on your unit circle, and that it's actually the vertical, the sine is your y, so that's your vertical distance from the x-axis to a point on the circle. So we can define sine as the vertical distance from the x-axis to the point on the unit circle. So these should be gimmies, guys. The vertical distance from the x-axis. We did that with the spaghetti lab. That's why we took the spaghetti and measured the vertical distance and then cut it and then graphed it. Cosine is going to look almost just like this, only it's the horizontal distance because it's your x. So if you think about your x is from the origin to your x value. That's your horizontal distance. So the horizontal distance from the y-axis to a point on the unit circle. Please make sure you can write a complete sentence, meaning it starts with a capital letter and it ends with a period. And that concludes your test review. Good luck, guys.